Stephen Smith. I'm with Christian Leadership Partners. We provide leadership solutions for both profit and nonprofit organizations through coaching, teaching, and mentoring. I encourage you to take a look at our website, christianleadershippartners.org. There are lots of tools that are there and available for you as a leader to become your best you. I also encourage you to subscribe to this channel so you don't miss any of our content. It's really important for you as a leader to be able to find the best resources possible, and we hope that we're providing that for you. I also encourage you to share this on Facebook or Instagram or YouTube, wherever you're finding this at. I do encourage you to share this with others so that the word can get out. And again, this is absolutely free. We're not copywriting it or anything like that. I encourage you to take it and use it to the best of your advantage. What we're doing is we're providing you with a free 30-day coaching session that looks at the leadership of the kings of Israel. Why would we do that? Well, there are three reasons, really. The first reason is that it gives us an example of what good leadership looks like and what bad leadership looks like. And so what we want to do is we want to be able to take those good leadership examples and apply them to our lives. And as leaders, we also need to identify what bad leadership looks like. And we want to remove those things. We want to make sure that we don't follow the bad examples of those above us. And we can see that in this study of these kings. The other thing that we want to do is we want to make sure that we take a look at a historical record of what leadership actually looks like. If we're able to do that, what will happen is that we can take a look at what their plans, their preparations, their executions are, and what the results of that are, especially if there's a historical record of it. And the Bible gives us a perfect example of leaders who went out and did those types of things. So that's what we want to do there. The third thing that we want to accomplish here is we want to take a look at servant leadership. Now, we won't see a lot of examples of servant leadership in the Old Testament, but what we will see is that Jesus Christ was the perfect servant leader. And in fact, Robert Greenleaf actually looked at the life of Christ, went through the Gospels, and developed several different leadership techniques and processes that Jesus modeled, and he encourages us as leaders to adopt these in the servant leadership theory. And that's what we'll take a look at the last few days of this study, where we'll spend a lot of time on this topic. So I encourage you to hang with us all the way through to the end, but this study should make a difference in your life, and I really hope that it really helps you to become what you are capable of being. So what we're going to do today is we're going to take a look at the life of Jehoaz, who is the son of Jehu. Remember Jehu, 2 studies ago, we looked at what he did. He came in, did what the Lord wanted him to do. He stopped Baal worship in the northern kingdom, but he never really turned from idol worship. And, a lot of times we as leaders, we don't cut things out of our lives that have actually harmed us. We'll say, well, I can overcome that, and we just absolutely leave it there all alone. And what happens is that it comes back and it haunts us, and it affects us tremendously. Well, it affected Jehoaz as well. Take a look at 2 Kings 13, 1 and 2. It says, Jehoaz, son of Jehu, began to rule over Israel in the 23rd year of King Joash's reign in Judah. He reigned in Samaria 17 years, but he did what was evil in the Lord's sight. He followed the example of Jeroboam, son of Nebat, continuing the sins that Jeroboam had led Israel to commit. So what we can see here is that Jehoaz took a bad example and he continued to follow it. What we want to do as leaders is we want to identify those people who are good examples for us. If I can identify a good leader in my life, then I want to be able to model the things that he or she does so that I can make sure that I'm going to be as successful as they are. Now, if you don't have a good leader in your team, what we want to do is we want to look towards other people. You can take a look at Tony Robbins, you can look at John Maxwell, you can look at a former president, you can look at former leaders, you can even look at some of the leaders in the kings of Israel, and you can see that if you follow along and study what it was that they did, and if they were successful, then we should be successful if we apply those same techniques. So what we want to do then is we want to start identifying who those people in our lives are so we can follow along with that. So let's take a look at this. This is 2 Kings 13, 3 and 4. And it says, So the Lord was very angry with Israel, and he allowed King Hazael of Aram and his son Ben-Hadad to defeat them repeatedly. Then Jehoaz prayed to the Lord for help. And the Lord heard his prayer, for he heard how severely the king of Aram was oppressing them. So what we see is that Jehoaz recognized something after failing several different times. What he did was he went to the Lord. He simply prayed and he said, Lord, I really need your help. He went to the right people for the right solutions, and the Lord provided that for him. And we can see that when we do this, When we look for the right solutions and we find the right things, then what we want to do is we want to make sure that we implement them. 2 Kings 13:5 tells us, "So the Lord provided someone to rescue the Israelites from the tyranny of the Arameans. Then Israel lived in safety again as they had in the former days." So we can see that Jehoahaz had made a couple of really good decisions here, where he reached out to the Lord. He found the wise advice, and he found the people that could save his kingdom and to get things back on track and get them refocused. So what he did was he turned back again to the Lord. He recognized that that was where his strength was, and he started focusing on the things that the Lord had in store for him. But like all the other kings before him, he didn't cut out all the evil out of the land. We have to ask ourselves that question as leaders: what is it that we're leaving behind that is keeping us from accomplishing what we know we can as good leaders? So a lot of times what will happen is that the things that we leave in our lives, or the things that we leave in our organizations that we don't cut out will come back and they'll haunt us. Take a look at this. This is 2 Kings 13:6. It says, "But they continued to sin, following the evil example of Jeroboam. They also allowed Asherah poles in Samaria to remain standing." So they didn't realize that what they were doing was they were slowly killing themselves by 1,000 paper cuts. These paper cuts were simply the idols that were left there. If they had continued to follow and serve the Lord in the way that God wanted them to, then they would not have been decimated the way that they were. Now, slowly but surely, these kings started to fail. And we can see that here with Jehoahaz as well. In 2 Kings 13:7, it says, "Finally, Jehoahaz's army was reduced to 50 charioteers, 10 chariots, and 10,000 foot soldiers. The king of Aram had killed the others, trampling them like dust under his feet." So what we see then is that Jehoahaz was not able to continue to process the way that he was supposed to, because he didn't cut all these negative things out of his life. And what we want to do as leaders is make sure that we're not doing that. So if I can find the things that are causing difficulties in my life, then I need to cut them out, even if they're not causing difficulties at that time. Are you following what I'm saying? So if I know that I can do that, then I know that I'm not going to be cut down by these 1,000 paper cuts that will keep me from being the leader that I've always been meant to be. So we can take a look at Jehoahaz's leadership, and we want to see some of the successes and some of the failures. Now, his one success was that he realized when he was wrong and he cried out to the Lord for help. We need to be able to do this as leaders as well. We need to be able to cry out when we need the help to make sure that we don't fail to a point of complete and utter decimation or total failure. So recognize what your strengths are, but also know what your weaknesses are so that you can ask for help in those areas. Now, Jehoahaz's failures were this: he continued to follow the practices of his father. He had bad examples ahead of him, and what he did was he followed their practices right along, thinking that it was okay. So we have to identify these negative things in our lives and make sure that we're cutting those things out as well. He also failed to use the resources that he had available to him. We as leaders are given certain resources, and sometimes it's as simple as the mind and the gifts and the talents that we have, and other times it's a large amount of money. It can be tools that we can use to be able to accomplish the tasks that we've been given. Whatever those things are, we want to identify what they are and make sure that we're using them in a proper way. We also can see that Jehoahaz was a poor strategic leader. In other words, a strategic leader, what they do is they're supposed to take the time to look forward and say, okay, this is where I want to go. What are the things that I need to do to achieve that? And Jehoahaz failed to do that. So we want to make sure that we're not doing that either. So we can do that through these two different questions. I encourage you to write these down. You can also download a copy of them down in the notes down below. But the first question is this: when do you reconsider your actions as a leader? When is it that you say, I need to stop, I need to regroup, I need to take a look at what I'm doing. Am I doing this in a proper way, and am I succeeding in everything that I set my hands to? The second question that we want to ask ourselves are, what are some of the examples of how you think and plan strategically? So you want to think about different ways that you do this. Do you think forward about where you're at and then think about the different steps that it's going to take to get there? Or possibly do you do backwards planning? Do you say, okay, this is where I'm at, I want to make sure that I get to this point, and the steps to get there are here, 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 and here. I'm going to identify what those are all the way to the point of where we're at, and we set goals to be able to accomplish those tasks. So that's what we want to do. We want to be able to make sure that we take these leadership tools, these leadership opportunities that we're providing for you through this teaching, and use them. And in the meantime, I really do encourage you to go out and be that leader that God's called you to be.